So actually, as a kid, I wanted to be a pro hockey player and a cartoonist in the off season. And so the art part, has obviously come back in this Cosmic Journal, and even in like Evolved Enterprise, my other book, I didn't feel like it was fully complete. And then literally at like 3:00 in the morning, I'm like, oh, I should illustrate a few things in here. So I added a few doodles, and then it's got like this surge of energy around it. And so like going back to the stuff that you loved as a kid, doesn't even matter why, but seeing how do we incorporate it in certain ways. And it may be incorporating your business, or it might not be. It might just be like almost like scheduling play dates for yourself. Play is recreation for a reason, or recreation essentially. And it's just so powerful. Like you can just tell when somebody's lost that little boy or girl inside of them. There's a guy named Stuart Brown, who's I think a PhD, who wrote a book called literally Play. Mm-hmm. And his quote in here is, the opposite of play is not work. The opposite of play is depression.
I'm Srini Rao, and this is the Unmistakable Creative Podcast, where you get a window into the stories and insights of the most innovative and creative minds who've started movements, built thriving businesses, written best-selling books, and created insanely interesting art. For more, check out our 500-episode archive at unmistakablecreative.com. Yanik, welcome to the Unmistakable Creative. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Srini, I'm super excited that we could find time in between your snowboarding and
You have fallen victim to my notorious rescheduling for the one thing that I will consistently reschedule for, which is either surf conditions or a day on the mountain. But you also caught me in a move to
Yeah. But as I said before, I totally understand, and I actually appreciate it. Which is
Well, I never lie. I usually just tell people, hey, I need to get a day on the mountain or I'm going to lose my mind. And trust me, we'll have a better conversation if we
for sure. And it's like, it's just, it's a really good reminder that, to make sure that you're taking care of yourself.
Yeah. Well, so I want to start differently than we did last time, because I believe, if I remember correctly, last time I asked you about what your parents did for work. But this time, I want to start by asking you, what is one of the most important things that you learned from one or both of your parents that have influenced and shaped who you've become and what you've done with your life and sort of, your character and the way that you've run your business and, the work that you've done?
Great question. I've learned a lot from both of them, and they're kind of two different people. So my family's Russian immigrants. We came over when I was 3 years old from Russia, from Moscow. And my dad pretty much got started right away with a medical equipment sales and service company because he was about to get fired from his work at a hospital. And he had a choice to either get fired or leave, and he left. And so I learned from my dad, for sure, this idea of starting with nothing and building up something, that immigrant success mentality and how to just, again, start from nothing, build up something. My mom, she really, gave me the gift of like just joy and happiness, and also following your own heart. Like she had suffered from breast cancer and ovarian cancer, and then breast cancer again for quite a long time. And then there's like 3 or 4 times the doctors like, get your things together, and she beat it each time. But anytime she was feeling good, she was just happy and making sure that she was living life to the fullest. And I remember, one incident was really stands out for me was she was going to get remarried. My parents divorced when I was 13, and she was getting remarried a long time after. And so I'm like, well, I'll pay for your wedding and honeymoon, but we're going to Vegas and you're going to get married by Elvis. Like, yeah, done. So, we had these great photos of her getting married off by Elvis, and just, she like, it didn't even like give, not even a second thought. She's like, yeah, of course.
Wow. So, your mother, that sounds so different than sort of the standard immigrant narrative of we're here to bust our asses. It sounds like you have two very sort of different narratives from each parent, each of which have influenced you so that you turn out much more balanced than somebody who basically just, works their fingers to the bone. So a couple of things come from that. I wonder, out of that immigrant narrative, you having had children, how much of that has been passed on, and how much of that work ethic have you instilled in them, and what parts have you found that you get resistance from them when you try to instill some of this?
Man, the kid part is interesting. My kids now are 14 and 12, and the one thing that I think that we did really well with them, there's a lot of things, but one thing that's been consistent is like a couple years ago we created something we call the 13 Silver Keys. And these are like kind of like core values. And so most of the time on Sunday nights, we'll have a dinner, and then the kids will share something that happened during the week that we're parts of this, that are examples of these 13 silver keys. And so it's everything from like sing, dance, and laugh to go the extra mile, to explore, dare to dream big, to all the way at the end, which is make magic, like being open and looking for the magic in the world and these things that show up in these amazing ways. So what I've always thought about is that I want to leave just like trail markers, right? Like I don't want them to follow, I don't need them to follow exactly what I've done. I don't want to push them in a direction. I just want to give them like just some mile marker points or just, a little bit of a GPS that they can follow. And I want them to follow what gives them their true happiness, that they feel really utilized and like they're contributing in their unique way. And I'm more about like them seeing what I do and less about me telling them. So I like it when they see me doing yoga or meditating. I like it when they, see me going off and doing wild adventures and they know I'm signed up to go into space and so forth. So like, for me, it's much more about truly living my life and then that being the example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one thing I always wonder with people who have parents who are immigrants and then grow up in this country. I don't know if your wife is of Russian descent or not, but
way back. So I'd say American.
Yeah. So the thing that I always wonder is when you have immigrant parents, you come to this country, you have this aspect of culture. How do you choose what you're going to preserve and retain and maintain heritage over time? Because and I've talked about this on the show before, but I've always been intrigued by it for some reason, because I think that the first thing to go usually is language, and then bit by bit, other things start to go. So I wonder, how have you chosen to preserve aspects of your own culture with your kids?
I don't think I've done a great job with this actually, because my parents would talk to me in Russian. I'd respond back in English.
I can relate.
And
Russian, but like, our language.
Yeah. Like you didn't want to be the weirdo immigrant child. And I was for sure the weirdo immigrant child. I joke around with my friends and my cousin who's known me, for forever. She's 7 years younger and now she works with me. I'm like, I didn't have sneakers until I was 14. She's like, whatever, you're lying. I'm like, no, really. And I like pulled up a picture and it's like these brown leather or something, shoes. And then I had sandals and just like at some point you want to fit in. Right. So that was a big part. And then you're like, that was actually really special that you had this other background and then you start coming back to it in some ways. So but I don't think I've done a great job of like instilling, anything. So our heritage is Russian Jews. So instilling the Judaism part, like, and I also don't like relate anymore to any of that. Like I'm much more universal, spiritual than anything else. I'm interested in where all religions or where all spiritual traditions intersect and so forth. So I'm just like more about like letting them figure it out on their own. And I don't know, it's tough because there's no real like Russian celebration that we as a family continue doing. And there's no like, we'll do like Hanukkah or something like that. But there's no real tradition that continues.
Wow. So, I want to revisit part of the conversation that you and I had last time. And I still to this day remember this, and I've written about it in articles. I've quoted it. We were talking about money and success. And I remember you telling me the story of how you sold your Aston Martin and you had this client who had told you that he wanted to be a billionaire. And when you had him really dissect the essence of his goal, it turned out that he didn't need $1 billion. And I remember even going through this exercise myself, thinking the same thing. And I thought, okay, the only thing I could use $1 billion for is to buy a professional sports team, which is a weird sort of interest of mine. I don't even like watch sports, but I play sports video games religiously. And I just think it would be awesome to own a sports team. So that's the only thing I could use $1 billion for. But that really struck me in particular because on any given day when you scroll through your Facebook news feed, you go to websites like Medium, people hear guests like you on podcasts like ours, there's this constant narrative of, oh, this is the standard for success. These are the people that we look up to. These are the people we should be modeling ourselves after. And yet that almost kind of, that you have these two messages that are in conflict with each other. One, which is about the essence of your goals, and yet you're constantly being bombarded by external influences that potentially alter what you think are the essence of your goals, or is the essence. So I wonder how you navigate that dynamic.
I think you have to really I love continuing to question what is, what's sort of the essence of it, right? Like getting down to bedrock. And one of the easiest ways of doing it is if you find yourself being like, oh yeah, I wish I had whatever, make up a number, or make up a thing that you want. I want, this particular, beach house, or I want this jet, or I want, whatever it is. I want $1 million in the bank. I want 10. I want, like you said, $1 billion, whatever it is. And then if the easiest way is to just ask why and write. I'm a big journaler. We'll talk about journaling, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So writing even just why. Right. And then writing why again, and then writing why again, and why again, and why again. So even just like 5 times will get you down to what is the true bedrock of it. And it gets away from like, what's the ego aspect of it, and what's the true essence of it. And usually it's around either freedom or love, or just something that's a much more, just deeper essence that you can get to. Mm-hmm. And then I'll give you a really cool magic way of doing this even more. So you could do it with your dominant hand. You could also do maybe your first couple answers with your dominant hand, and then your last 2 with your non-dominant hand. So use your, I'm right handed, so I would use my left hand and come up with something. And it's so powerful. It's so deep.
Mm. So what I wonder about somebody like you, I mean, like I said, we talked about the fact that you had sold an Aston Martin, last time we were here. So, I mean, you had pretty much everything that most of us think equals success by material standards. This whole idea of understanding the essence of your goals, is that a conclusion that you came to after you achieved material success? Because I think that in my mind, the sort of cynical person would say, yeah, that's easy for Yanik to say. He has money and he's well off.
Yeah, it's. I wrote a blog post way back about like, does something about, I can't remember the title, but it was something. But the essence of it was like, does wanting a Rolex make you successful? And it was just like, originally way back, I wanted a Rolex to like kind of prove I was successful, and then I got it, and I was like, man, and then it was the fancier car, and it kept upgrading fancier cars, and then it was. And like I had this whole progression of goal setting. Originally it's just like writing down your goal, a very specific thing, and then I added or more, or better, or faster, or sooner, whatever it is, and then it was okay. What's it really about? And the 10 million in the bank is really about the freedom of working with who you want, doing the things that you want when you want. Yeah. And you don't need the 10 million in the bank. Like before that, it's like you get to the real essence of it. So I haven't come to a conclusion if you actually need the material wants first that then drive you to do it, or if you can just be wise enough and smart enough and be like, well, maybe I don't need that.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something in you that you have to like prove it to yourself or prove it to your parents or something like that. But if you can get away from that, like, and really look at why are you doing it again, then maybe you can shortcut that process.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's the sort of hedonic treadmill, right? Of the goalpost just keeps moving. And even Ryan Holiday, when we were here recently, it was crazy to this was his 8th book, which I think was number 1 on the New York Times bestseller list after 8 tries, and now 3 books in the same year. But one of the things that he said that was so interesting was he said, that there's always this next level that we think we have to get to. And he said, and the thing is, he said that drives a lot of accomplishment, that belief, because he said, if we didn't have that, then nobody who is senator would have the ambition to become president. So he said, it's good on the aggregate, but on the individual level, it's a complete lie. It doesn't lead to the satisfaction that you think it will. And yet I think that anybody listening to this can understand that intellectually, but until they're in that position of being there, I don't think they get sort of an emotional understanding of it. Because, I mean, even when I came to your events, one of my first thoughts was, what the hell am I doing here? Everybody here is like a millionaire, and I'm, a guy writing books and like putzing along. I feel like a total imposter in this environment. Because, I mean, the people in your circle are impressive, to say the least. Every one of them has built like huge companies or taken companies public or been, at the forefront of, massive public companies. So, with that, dynamic, how do you, I guess, really learn from people like this without falling into this imposter syndrome trap? And do you ever feel that when you're surrounded by these people?
Yeah, I do actually, because you get in that spot, especially when you start comparing, and that's such and this is one of the things I keep, like my daughter would. You could wake her up at 3 a.m. and she'd be like, don't compare. If you compare, it makes you unhappy or whatever, and she'll like roll her eyes when she tells you that, but she's heard it enough that maybe it sinks in, and it's definitely difficult if you allow yourself to get on that same path, which is especially as if looking at social media or looking at anyone else's stuff going on, or you start comparing yourself to them. And what I found is it's really funny. Like you don't realize that they're also thinking the same, because you most likely have done something that they're like, oh, I wish I could do that, or whatever the case is. But and at the real core of it, though, is like how comfortable we are with ourselves, and how well we know ourselves, how well we truly, I mean, this is going to sound soft and fluffy, but how well we love ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think this is a mutual friend of ours, Kamal Ravikant, who wrote an amazing book, Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. And it just got released again. And, that was when I was going through a pretty dark time of like just my identity being so wrapped up into my business, and things were going sideways because I had kind of followed this cosmic alarm clock, as I call it, of like getting away from the digital marketing, internet marketing space, and just following what this whole maverick path was. There's definitely a dark period of like, wow, my friends are like killing it and crushing it. And I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like sideways. Just, it would be so easy at that point to go back to the sort of the golden handcuffs, but I kept being driven by this fact that there was something more, and a bigger reason why. And I think if you have a bigger reason why for what you're doing, you're able to then not be so influenced by what seems like is the typical narrative that society is thrusting on us.
Yeah. It's funny to hear you talk about sort of moving away from that sort of digital marketing, aspect of things. I think when we rebranded as Unmistakable Creative, that was like a very, very clear decision to do exactly that. But I knew also the cost of doing that was going to be that it would slow down our growth. We would be taking a step back and, 2 steps back to take 20 forward in the future. And I saw it firsthand that people who started after we did became bigger. They had bigger audiences with their podcasts. And yet, I also started to see those very same people almost 2 or 3 years later start to bow out. And I mean, these are mutual friends of ours who basically have put their podcast on a temporary hiatus, which to me basically means they're not coming back. And I realized, I was like, wow, okay, had I not been committed to this sort of purpose that I have to make the world more creative, then I think, it would have been easy to basically sell out, so to speak, and do something out of line.
Or get lost doing the stuff that you thought you should be following, or that is the next trend or the next whatever. But yeah, having that bedrock of the, that mission and that North Star is so powerful. And it takes exploration. I mean, it really takes you doing the hard work of, as creatives. Like I think, as entrepreneurs, I think we're all artists as well. Yeah. So I think there's a real nice overlap between this idea of unmistakable creatives and artists and entrepreneurs, because like I feel like you can truly put your heart and soul into something, and it's a piece of art. But you also have to look at some of the darker sides of yourself, which is your shadow aspects.
Yeah.
And not enough people really look at that part, because it's messy and it's painful, and it requires you to do some digging. And so like I was actually just having a conversation with I can't remember who it was yesterday at a small little marketing mastermind I was at, but we were talking about the shadow side, and they were asking me about what had I explored on my shadow side, and I immediately brought up about this part of an artist. And then having an archetype, which is being self-sabotaging as an artist. And I'm like, okay, well, every single part of us actually empowers us, and there's a reason for it if we can make friends with that part of us. And so how does that help me? And then it forced me to look at everything that didn't feel like art to me. I would kind of self-sabotage. Like I wouldn't want it to get out and get bigger, because it didn't feel like the fullest expression of who I was. And so that's why I think I shut down a lot of these other things. That's why, I kept it's like as you move up higher and higher in this mountain, I guess you're whittling away what isn't truly you. You're whittling away what's really, really good to get to what's really great.
Wow. So I think this actually makes a perfect segue into talking about the new book. But before we do that, I want to ask you one other thing, which I think is actually a perfect setup to talk about the material in the book itself. You're this interesting blend of sort of emotional and logical, spiritual and practical. Because of the fact that you have all this stuff that I've often written off as new age bullshit, and yet you incorporate it into your life in a way that makes you successful. So I wonder how people integrate those two things at the same time, because I think that our tendencies are to go in one extreme or the other. I know that for me, the tendency is absolutely to go in the extreme of logic. And I'm like, if you can't back it up with real science, it's nonsense to a fault. Like I'm skeptical almost to a fault of things that I can't explain or understand with research. And so, I wonder how you've integrated both those aspects of yourself and how other people do as well.
I think it's being open to it is one thing. Like, so actually I'm drinking from a mug, and it has like one of my favorite quotes on there from attributed to Einstein, which says there are only two ways to live your life. One is though nothing is a miracle, and the other as though everything is. And I think it comes with our just being willing to just be open. You don't have to be so open that you accept absolutely everything that's thrown at you. But I think that we have a really good internal barometer of like, okay, that resonates and that feels true, even if you can't 1000% show the facts behind it or the science behind it or whatever. You want to make it feel fully just logical, and I think that's where I'm okay with like being open to stuff and not having to say, okay, prove it to me fully. And you'll find this a lot with I don't know how often you have like synchronicities or these things that show up in your life like that. And to me, they're a perfect example of that, because there's always a way of like writing it off as like, well, it could just be a coincidence. But when you start looking at it, it might not be a coincidence. Like, I don't know, like one that really, really meant a lot for me and was we normally do a summit for Maverick members. It used to be in the first week in December. We've since moved it now to like the second week in January, but it's always like that first week in December. And so during 2012 for this Mayan calendar change, I had been studying a lot about this, and I just thought it was really fascinating. I'm like, we need to be there. And my team's like, what? No, we're not going there. It's 4 days before Christmas. And I'm like, no, we need to go down to the Mayan Riviera. And then they were able to find a Mayan village we could actually spend the night at. And we brought everyone in, and we brought everyone into a temazcal. I don't know if you know what that is, which is a sweat lodge. But a Mayan sweat lodge. And so you go in there, and the symbolism is that you're going into the womb of the earth to be reborn. And so we were like late getting there. There's an accident on the road. The shaman was late. And we had two groups that were in there because it was like 60 some people and only fits about 30 people. And this is super, pitch dark. And then it's hard to breathe because they bring in lava rock that they pour water on. It's like, imagine a sauna, but times 5, how hot it is, or times 3. And pitch dark, closed, very low ceilings. And previous to that, I got bits of claustrophobia, so I didn't think I was going to stay in there, but I did stay in there. And so we literally come out. You have to yell to move this big boulder that they have blocking the entrance. And we yell, and then we come out. And we hear the other group being like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we came out literally at midnight at the on the winter solstice of this Mayan calendar change. And it was like the first time that I can really recall that I was like, this is exactly where I was meant to be in this time and space, because previous to that, I'm a 7 on an Enneagram, which is like, you want to experience everything. You want to try everything. You want to, knock it off your checklist and so forth. And it was such a powerful moment for me, in that symbolism being reborn, that it just felt like we were meant to be there. Now, you could be like, well, of course, it just so happened that you came out at midnight, and that could be the case too. But it had such tremendous meaning for me, and synchronicity, and that's the other thing, is that we're all meaning making machines. So why not also allow yourself to have a greater meaning aligned with something bigger?
Mm-hmm. Wow. So I don't know about you, but vacuuming is not one of those things that I ever look forward to doing. But as you know, your environment has a huge impact on your creativity. So I still like it to be clean wherever I'm living and working. But now it doesn't have to be something that you deal with. If you're like me and you grew up in the 80s, you probably fantasized about the day when cleaning your house would be like it was for the Jetsons, meaning you don't have to lift a finger. Well, the good news is that we're already kind of living in that future. And the easiest way to make sure your floors are clean every day is with the iRobot Roomba Robot Vacuum. It cleans up after itself. The Clean Base automatic dirt disposal takes convenience to a new level, automatically empties its own bin into an allergen lock bag that holds 60 days of debris and traps 99% of pollen, mold, and dust mites, so you can forget about vacuuming for months at a time. Let the Roomba clean for you instead. It learns your home, finds dirt, and empties itself on its own. It's got powerful cleaning performance made effortless. Remember, if it's not from iRobot, it's not a Roomba. To learn more, go to irobot.com/unmistakable. Hey, it's Srini. I hope you're liking this episode of the Unmistakable Creative. Did you know that every Sunday, our community manager, Melina, sends out 10 key takeaways from episodes like this one? All you have to do to receive it is sign up for our newsletter. Just visit unmistakablecreative.com/newsletter and you'll get them delivered right to your inbox. Again, that's unmistakablecreative.com/newsletter. Well, I think that makes, like I said, a perfect segue into the book to do something that has a greater meaning that's aligned with you. I mean, you and I were talking about the whole audience of one concept and the fact that this really began as something you started doing for an audience of one, which led to a book deal with the publisher. So what prompted this?
Yeah, so it's this cosmic journal. You know what prompted it way back is actually I just realized this, and it's another synchronicity, which is really interesting. Was have you ever seen Carl Jung's Red Book?
I haven't actually.
It's a fascinating. It's like super oversized book. It's a book that he released after his death, or his family released. He didn't want to put it out while he was alive because he was worried that the scientific community wouldn't take him seriously anymore, because it was basically a channeled book. It was like this, that he had this entity, Philemon, who was like, feeding him this whole story and this mythical story. And so he drew it, illustrated all of it. And I was just like fascinated by this. I've loved Jung just from all the different things he's brought forth. And so I had actually drawn a picture of him in my journal way back, and had a little cartoon, thought bubble, dialogue bubble. And it said, create your own Red Book. And I'm like, oh, that's funny. And then, like, I saw many years later, I saw this challenge going around, which was a 100-day art challenge. And so in my journal, I even wrote, like, thinking about it. I'm like, God, do I want to do this? Like, I travel around a lot. Do I really want to commit to this? Like, what would it be? And then what would I be excited to put out a piece of art every single day for? And so I decided on, like, creating a journal page every single day that was illustrated, and then just my thoughts on just, I call it this galactic instruction manual you were missing when you're born to remember your destiny here. Mm-hmm. And that's really what I was, the audience of one is for myself. It was like my own little galactic instruction manual of fulfilling my destiny here. And so every single day, so instead of 100 days, I made it 108 days, because in the wisdom and yogic traditions, much more meaningful number. And very first thing I did was have my black moleskin, and I put 108 blank checkboxes, and just committed to doing it every single night. So some nights it would be taking something from my, from years and years of journals, and then going back and redoing them and putting them in this thing. And other times it'd literally just be meditating and seeing what wanted to come through me. Mm. And it was like have you ever like felt like, so I have this term that I love. It's called effortless effort. Yeah. Like putting your full self into something, but it feels like so joyful, like you're feeling fully utilized. And that's how I felt every single day when I checked off that checkbox. And some nights, it's 2:00, 3:00, 4:00 in the morning that I'm writing this. I could be at one of our events. Whatever it is, I'm like, no, I'm committed to doing this. And that checkbox is so powerful. And as a byproduct, anytime you make these kind of commitments to yourself and you follow through, your self-confidence, I think the way that you make agreements with yourself gets stronger and stronger. And so that was another byproduct. But then I started using it like an oracle, like maybe about 50, 60, 70 days into it. I would just pop it open, and it would have like this incredible message for me, and all this magic would show up. And And so a funny, like just synchronicity that I just realized was, so when I wrote that little thing about Jung, and I actually illustrated a picture from the book, it was print number 111. And this cosmic journal, it's like the wildest thing I've ever edited or put together. And so when I finished it up, I had an artist scan in all the pages, and they're little like 2-inch by 2-inch little contact sheets that I cut up. And so imagine this, Renee, I had literally all these pages, 2-inch by 2 inches on my kitchen island, and trying to figure out what the hell the order was. And so like moving them around, and then I put like a little note on there for my kids in the morning. I'm like, don't touch this, don't blow, don't like do anything. Like, so I was up late working on it. And then the night that I finished it was at exactly 1:11 a.m. And then that piece from the Carl Jung book was print number 111. And then I also created these left-hand prompt pages because, again, they were just created for me. But when I made it into a real project, I finished those left-hand prompt pages at 1:11 a.m. And it wasn't like I had this alarm that goes off. I'm like, okay, I'm done. So just really lots of unique, magical things that happen from it.
So I think just when I looked at this, I noticed that you had so many sort of different life lessons. You talk about the benefits of journaling. One of the questions I had about the creative aspect of this is, do you actually know how to draw? Did you draw all this stuff yourself during the process? Because my handwriting is so atrocious that I could never pull something like this off.
Yeah, I hand drew every single one of these things. Every single page is hand drawn by me, handwritten by me, which also made the editing process unbelievably interesting, because when it did turn into a real thing, my editor's like, okay, you need to get rid of this paragraph or this thing. And then we'd be like, I'd rewrite the entire page or a section, and then we cut and paste and add new, I have to have new drawings at certain times. It was fascinating.
So I want to start with the thing that stood out to me the most in terms of all of this. And one of the things you mentioned is, why blend in if you are made to stand out? I mean, given that I've built an entire brand around that message, to me, that was naturally the one that stood out to immediately.
Yeah.
So what do you think it is about us that makes us want to fit in when we're made to stand out? And I'll give you one other example. So yesterday I wrote a blog post. This has been an ongoing thought in my head that I've just been kind of riffing on. And, as a joke, I wrote a Facebook post titled "Fix Your Fucked Up Life, Have More Sex, and Make More Money," which I think is the premise of every self-help book ever written. And I wrote it as a joke. And then I did a follow-up on it about coaches and self-help books, and how basically it just is this vicious circle of buy my book, come to my seminar, then hire me to be your coach to fix the problem that you never had to begin with. And I got some flack for it. And I noticed this morning, I was thinking to myself, wow, these are friends of mine, people who've been guests on the podcast, and I kind of pissed them off. And part of me was like really close to saying, oh, maybe I should go delete the post.
Right. But that's how you truly felt. It's like, it's just so much easier to kind of blend in and not proclaim what makes us so remarkable, what makes us so unique, what makes us, because it's safer or feels safer. But at the same time, I feel like our soul dies a little bit each moment that we don't do that. You talk about the imposter syndrome, being in that room or feeling it, but the true imposter syndrome to me is living your life that you're just kind of mailing it in, you're phoning it in. And so this is page 35 that you're talking about. It says, why blend in if you're made to stand out? And it says, somehow we think we're being humble if we don't proclaim our greatness, to fully stand up and be in our unique contribution, the thing you do better than just about anyone else. And usually it's a combination of several talents and interests from your background. Nobody likes the overconfident boaster, but more times than not, we underestimate how valuable what we do really is. Sometimes it's because it comes so easy to us. But genius is the combination of multiple areas that are perfectly natural for us, and only you. Stand fully in that perfect space. Deliver your greatest gift to the world. We're waiting. And, again, this is like partly written for me. And now that I think about it, now that it's out, like is really written for my kids, for my grandkids. It's like, it's just, things that were going through my head or lessons that I want to pull out from over the years, but then some were like just completely new things that were just downloads from the universe that I got. And this idea of not wanting to stand out it's like this combination of like, well, it seems so easy what I do so well that no one else would value it.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to get rid of. But then also it's like this combination, like where I think the real creativity is combining multiple things together and coming up with your own new, almost like new genre in a way. And the guy who created Dilbert, Scott Adams, I think talks about like, where are like 3 items that you can do you can do really well, and you combine them together. And then that becomes the unique thing that you do. And all of it is like, we look back and there's like these little dots, these little connection points, these little things that we loved, and then you start combining it all, and that's where the magic is.
Yeah. I think one of the other ones, naturally, of course, being somebody who's an author and who lives and dies by books, was the idea of books stack your positive future. And I know that you and I have had multiple Instagram conversations about our libraries because I think we're both very much just sort of book addicts. Like I go through 2 books a week. One, you even write about sort of some of your earliest books that have influenced you. What are some not so conventional books, maybe ones that we haven't heard mentioned 1,000 times, that have played a role in your life?
Yeah. I mean, to me, books are like, they're some of my best friends. Like I love books because, somebody put 10, 20, 30, 40 years of their life into it. The ones anyway, who truly put their heart and soul into the books. And it's just such a powerful thing. And then, I think there's magic in books too, like the right kind of books. So I'm a big fan of like oracles, and then like, obviously, as you know, like the magic and the synchronicity and the things like that. So I'll flip to different books and be like, oh, here's the message I need for today or whatever it is. And I love that part. But some ones that I think are maybe underrated or really weird and cool. There's one called A Brief Tour of Higher Consciousness by a guy named Itzhak Bentov. He was like, he helped invent like missiles in the Israeli army, and he's invented a bunch of different things, like a bunch of like some cardiac maybe stents or something like that. So not a dumb guy, but he was a hardcore meditator, and then this was like what came out of his meditations. And so it's a really, really cool, it's a really interesting book, and not super well known. And then I don't know. I love weird books for sure. I don't know. Let's see what else would be interesting. We'll go with something really, really odd. Astrotheology and Shamanism. It was probably not too many people have read that. It's all about like the psilocybin mushroom and how that actually has influenced mystical thought and religion. And so I'm a fan of almost anything. I'm really intrigued by different things, and then making those connection points and seeing where they fit in.
So there's one other one that caught my attention, and I noticed that it was from your daughter. And so I wanted to have you talk about it, the Rainbow Rules.
Yeah, it's such a fun one. Let's see what page that is. Do you have a page number up?
I don't. I just noticed it because
you noticed.
Yeah, I saw that caught my attention while I was, like I said, this is one of the rare occasions which I don't have the physical version of your book in front of me because
I got it.
Packing.
Page 83. So this is so my daughter Zoe now is 12. I have a boy and a girl, and she's definitely the philosopher. I mean, when she was like 3, she's like, "So, Daddy, who are God's parents?" I'm like, "It's a great question." So she wrote these 7 rainbow rules, and it's like everyone has one same power, following your dreams. Everyone can be what they want. Everyone is true. Don't give up. Be cool. Do what you want and show it. Be special and good.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's so good. And so I wrote, I wrote by Zoe Silver, age 8.5, but I think it was like even when she was like 7 or so, I think a bit younger. And so I redrew these in her handwriting, and she's actually part of the book in different times. So I let her draw 1 or 2 little things in here. I let her, obviously this whole page is her page, and just this idea that like kids are kind of like the best truth tellers. Like I found her stuff in this old butterfly journal that I was cleaning out in the basement, and that's where these rainbow rules are. And then like I think our teachers are our children are our teachers. In like if we let them, and they are, they truly are, like there's something super wise about them if you let them kind of share with you their magic and allow them to do that.
Wow. So I think the thing that struck me most about those rainbow rules, as you were just even describing your daughter, is the sense of optimism that a kid has, and sort of the sense of cynicism that we start to develop as adults simply because of life experience, right? We basically, any one of us could take everything that is in one of the rainbow rules and say, yeah, I have a counterexample based on life experience. Yeah. And I don't think that happens, necessarily because we're intentionally cynical, but life experience does harden us a little bit. So I wonder, how do you maintain that sort of semblance of childlike optimism as an adult?
I think it's so important to keep that inner child, that piece of you alive. And so for me, it's usually going back to what did I love to do from the ages of maybe 8 to 13 or even 6 to 13, and seeing what was that, right? So as a kid, I wanted to be a pro hockey player and a cartoonist in the off season. And so the art part, has obviously come back in this cosmic journal, and even in Evolved Enterprise, my other book, I didn't feel like it was fully complete. And then literally at 3:00 in the morning, I'm like, oh, I should illustrate a few things in here. And then so I added a few doodles, and then it's got this surge of energy around it. And so going back to the stuff that you loved as a kid, doesn't even matter why, but seeing how do we incorporate it in certain ways. And it may be incorporated in your business, or it might not be. It might just be almost like scheduling play dates for yourself. And there's a page in here about play is called, play is recreation for a reason, or recreation essentially. And it's just so powerful. You can just tell when somebody's lost that little boy or girl inside of them. It's page 101. And there's a great quote in here. There's a guy named Stuart Brown, who's I think a PhD, who wrote a book called literally Play. Mm-hmm. And his quote in here was, the opposite of play is not work. The opposite of play is depression.
Wow.
And it's such a powerful concept that we can add play, what truly gives you joy, and how do you make sure that it's part of your life? It just is gonna so when I did this this challenge for myself, every single day, I can notice my creativity increased in other aspects of my business, of my work. I just felt more joyful. And so adding that part is so powerful. And I've been really lucky. The mentors that I have, they play. Right. There's a guy named Frank McKinney who builds these very high end mansions in Florida, South Florida, on the beach on spec. It's a $20 million mansion is his last one. He's about to retire. And then we would go to Haiti for several years together. And when we went to the orphanages, he just taught me even a whole new level of play. I can play for sure, but he is just even more so, and just to see it. Where he would climb up on top of this bus, and he would take a basketball and throw it as high as he could, and have all the kids try and catch it, and it land on some of their heads, and they'd all be laughing, he'd be laughing, and he'd have these races with them where they would run, and he would run with them, and it's just that is such a gift to not lose, because you can become super cynical and become an adult and feel oh, this is the way I'm supposed to be. And you don't have to be.
Wow. So I have two final questions for you. I think, getting back sort of to the essence of goals. At this point in your life, I think you've accomplished many of the things that most of us probably would consider bucket list items, the fancy cars, the, successful business, sort of all the check boxes of society's life plan, so to speak.
Right.
How do you define success now, and how has it changed with age?
To me, it's all about intentionality. It's about every single year, I'll go off into the woods a little bit on winter solstice, and then just set my intention for the year. And then also, as we're in this new decade, it's really become a new, just a mile marker of, okay, what is 2020 to me feels like a really powerful moment, because 2020 equals perfect vision. So really making sure that I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing. And the question that I've continued to sort of grapple with and explore is, and anyone that's successful, no matter what level, they have a lot of things they could be doing, but what are they truly meant to be doing? What's the discernment? What is theirs to do? And so that's been where I've been focused on. And I've really realized that for me, it's my role is to catalyze the catalysts. And that's, if I can be doing that, that's really, that's success for me.
Wow. Well, I have one last question for you, which is how we finish all of our interviews at the Unmistakable Creative. What do you think it is that makes somebody or something unmistakable?
I think it's when they put their full heart and soul into something, because it's that unique expression of who they truly are. And I think you hit it so well, this idea of an audience of one. It's like what you really want for yourself is going to make you unmistakable.
Amazing. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to join us and to come back for a second round of subjecting yourself to my insane questions.
It's always fun. It's always enjoyable, and you got good questions that make me think, and I love it.
Where can people find out more about you, your work, and the new book?
You can go to cosmicjournal.com and you can see some illustrations and different things. And actually, there's an Oracle page on there. You can click on it and it'll have a message for the day for you. Of course, any online booksellers got it. And then I blog occasionally at Yanik Silver, YANIK, silver.com.
Awesome. And for everybody listening, we'll wrap the show with that. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Unmistakable Creative Podcast. While you were listening, were there any moments you found fascinating, inspiring, instructive, maybe even heartwarming? Can you think of anyone, a friend or a family member who would appreciate this moment? If so, take a second and share today's episode with that one person, because good ideas and messages are meant to be shared.